Hi, I'm Lorraine. The morning of my wedding, I opened my garment bag and found a dress I'd never seen before. Cheap, oversized, and nothing like the one I'd chosen. My fiancé's family had secretly replaced it and then smiled at the altar like nothing had happened. What kind of family plans to humiliate you on your own wedding day? Have you ever felt like people smiled in your face while quietly tearing you down behind the scenes? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment. I'd love to know. And tell me, what would you have done if it were your dress? Let's talk. The hallway was quiet when I arrived. That strange kind of quiet that only happens in early morning light, when even time seems unsure if it should start yet. The scent of lavender floated just beneath the surface of the hallway air, coming from somewhere I couldn't name. Everything felt still. I stepped into the bridal suite and shut the door behind me. It clicked gently, as if it didn't want to disturb the silence either. My dress, my real dress, was supposed to be hanging in the closet on the right. I remember triple confirming it with the planner. I remember feeling relief when I dropped it off days ago, like one part of this complicated day had gone right. I unzipped the garment bag and stopped breathing. It wasn't my dress. The fabric looked cheap. The color was too bright, too white, almost blue under the light. The buttons were oversized plastic, lined awkwardly down the back, and it was several sizes too big. The tag was still attached, some brand I'd never heard of, like something you'd see shoved into a clearance rack on Halloween. I stared at it for a moment, frozen. Maybe it was a mix-up, a wrong bag, a terrible mistake. But then a thought crawled up my spine. No, this wasn't random. I stepped back, blinking too fast. The air felt heavier, as if the room had swallowed its own breath. I turned toward the door and opened it with trembling fingers. Naomi rushed in, hair half done, still holding a brush. When she saw the dress hanging limp and unfamiliar, her expression shifted. Not confused, just horrified. "Where is your real dress?" she whispered, barely able to get the words out. I didn't answer. I didn't have one. We called the planner, voicemail. We called the boutique, voicemail. The staff started searching the venue, running through rooms and storage closets. Naomi kept pacing. I just stood there, staring at nothing. My hands were open at my sides. My palms were sweating. "Who would do this?" Naomi finally asked. I still said nothing, but in my chest, something cold was beginning to burn. I asked someone to get Grayson. He showed up 5 minutes later, calm and smiling, like nothing in the world could shake him. He looked perfect in his tuxedo, like a man who belonged at the front of an aisle. I pointed at the dress. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Where's my gown?" He looked at it. He looked at me, and then he chuckled. Actually chuckled. "It's just a dress," he said. "My mom and Danica thought this one matched the theme better. It's a little more traditional. You'll wear what fits the vision." I stood completely still. Every sound in the room faded. The building could have crumbled, and I don't think I would have blinked. "You knew?" I asked. Grayson shrugged. "It's not that big of a deal. Don't let something this small ruin your morning." And just like that, I saw him for the first time. Not the version I built in my mind, but the real one. The one who would rather let me disappear quietly than risk upsetting his mother. I turned away without a word. Naomi followed me out, silent until we closed the door behind us. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. I walked to the mirror. The wrong dress hung behind me, limp and too bright. I looked at my own face, pale, still, determined. I remembered the boutique, the way I cried when I found my dress, the only thing I'd done entirely for myself. "I won't let them choose how I look," I said, "or who I am." Naomi didn't respond. She didn't have to. I asked her to zip me in. Her hands shook slightly. Mine didn't. We stepped into the hall. Somewhere nearby, I heard a string quartet tuning up. I kept walking. A guest raised their phone to film me as I turned the corner. Let them hear what I have to say." Naomi and I walked in silence down the hallway, the carpet too soft to echo the truth. But the quiet wasn't new. It reminded me of the first time I met his family, the night they made sure I knew where I stood without ever saying it aloud. It was the Del Vecchio estate. Everything in that house looked like it had a name or a title. Chandeliers the size of cars, curtains heavier than some of the thoughts I carried walking through the front door. The dining room was long and polished, with 12 chairs wrapped in ivory linen and trimmed in gold. Each one had a place card with a name. Carmela at the head, Danica just beside her, Grayson across from them. I looked for mine. I didn't find it. Before I could ask, Carmela smiled without looking up. "Oh, Lorraine doesn't need one. She's one of us now. No need for formality," Danica added. "That's what happens when you're already family." Her voice was sweet. Her eyes weren't. Everyone laughed. So I did too. I found the one empty chair, off to the side, not close to Grayson, not close to anyone, and I sat down. I smiled. I kept my hands on my lap and nodded when spoken to. No one asked me what wine I liked or whether I had a preference for salad dressing. Danica made jokes Grayson laughed at. Carmela corrected the way I pronounced gnocchi twice. I told myself it was fine. First dinners were awkward. People needed time to warm up to new energy. That's what Grayson said afterward when I asked him if I came off too quiet. "They just don't know you yet," he assured me, with a quick kiss on the temple and a distracted glance at his phone. Maybe. But even then, something inside me had begun to shrink. A whisper, "You don't belong here." I ignored it. I always did. Now, standing in Naomi's apartment, I pulled out my phone to check for updates on the dress. No new messages. But I did see something from her. A text sent minutes earlier. It was a photo, taken during that dinner, from across the table. Every place card was visible. All 11 of them, except mine. Her message underneath was just one sentence. They did that on purpose. I didn't want to say anything then. I stared at the photo for a long time. I remembered how the linen napkins were folded into roses. I remembered how I clinked my glass too softly during the toast because no one looked my way. I remembered that I wore heels that night that left cuts in my ankles because I thought maybe looking taller would make me seem more polished. And now, I remembered that no one ever forgot my name. They just wanted me to forget it. Small things came back in pieces. Carmela telling me, "You'll learn to dress more like us in time." Danica interrupting me mid-sentence when I tried to share a story about my job. Grayson never once turning to me unless someone asked a direct question. That night wasn't a misstep, it was a test. And I hadn't passed. I should have walked away then. But I stayed. And because I stayed, they kept pushing. The next time I was erased, it wasn't from a seat. It was from the very invitations themselves. I had taken so much care designing them. It was one of the few parts of the wedding I didn't hand over. Creamy cardstock with a subtle texture, soft gray font with gold foil on the names. I had envisioned our names side by side, centered, equally bold. Lorraine and Grayson, like two pillars, standing shoulder to shoulder. I remember showing Naomi the mock-up. I remember her saying, "It's perfect, it feels like you." For a brief moment, I felt like I had ownership over something in the ceremony. The box arrived one rainy afternoon. It was heavier than expected, stacked neatly, the Del Vecchio family crest pressed into the seal. I opened it carefully, almost ceremonially. I pulled one invitation out, then another, then another. My name was smaller, not just in size, but in placement. Grayson's name sat at the top, bold, centered, pronounced. Mine floated underneath like a footnote. The alignment was off from the version I had approved. My stomach turned in a way that felt familiar. At first, I told myself it was a printing error. It had to be. I called the designer, thinking she'd apologize, promise to fix it. She didn't. She told me the final version had been submitted by Carmela. "Minor changes," she said. "A more refined balance." Grayson had responded with a single line, "Yes, this feels better, go ahead." Better? For whom? I stared at the forwarded email thread. Carmela's words were clinical. "This version looks more refined, less overwhelming on her side." Her side. Like I was the decoration being edited to match the room. And Grayson? He didn't push back. He didn't ask me. He just approved it. I placed the card back into the box, carefully, as if it were radioactive. This wasn't about font. It wasn't about formatting. It was about message. I remembered something Carmela had said over brunch weeks before, casually dropping it between bites of toast. "You're a sweet addition, Lorraine, not the centerpiece." At the time, I'd smiled. because that's what I did when I didn't know what else to say. But now those words snapped into place like the final piece of a cruel puzzle. The name card missing from the dinner table, the silence at the engagement party, the shifting room assignment. Every moment was another chisel against who I thought I was in their world. Naomi hadn't seen the invitations yet. I hadn't told her about the dress. There were too many little humiliations piling into something larger, and I didn't know how to let them out without falling apart completely. I sat on the couch, alone in the quiet, a stack of untouched envelopes on the table in front of me, each one a reminder that I was being resized to fit someone else's frame. "They sent a message before I ever walked down the aisle," I whispered. I just didn't want to read it. They took my name off the card, but next, they made sure my voice was never on the list. I'd spent a week writing what I wanted to say. Just a short speech, 2 minutes, maybe 3. A thank you to my aunt who helped raise me after my father passed. A few quiet words to Naomi, who had carried so much of my stress like it was hers. And a small, sincere line for Grayson, for being the one person I thought stood with me through it all. I had practiced in front of the mirror, editing and trimming until every word sounded like me. I even chose a soft navy dress because Naomi said it brought out my clarity. And that night, I needed to feel clear. But when I arrived at the engagement dinner, dressed, ready, full of nerves, I scanned the program, and my name was gone. The list of speakers included Carmela, Danica, and a family friend from childhood Grayson had barely spoken to in a decade, but not me. I asked someone on the planning team, voice low so it wouldn't sound like I was making a fuss. She smiled apologetically and said, "We had to condense things. Time was tight, and the parents really wanted to say something." I nodded, though my stomach sank. Grayson was nearby, laughing with his cousin. I walked over, gently touched his arm, and asked if he knew. He avoided my eyes, said, "There was a change last minute. You'll still get to speak at the reception." That night wasn't mine. It never was. Midway through the dinner, I stepped out to the hallway to catch my breath. A heavy wooden partition separated the kitchen staff from the main room. I leaned against it, invisible behind the noise. That's when I heard Carmela's voice. "Letting her speak just invites drama," she said too calmly. "The less she talks, the smoother this goes." Danica answered with a soft chuckle. "She's already lucky we've embraced her this far." Neither of them saw me standing there. They didn't need to. Their words weren't meant to be hidden, just softly placed where they could settle like dust. I didn't move. I didn't storm in. I let their words wrap around my throat like a scarf too tight to breathe in, and I stood there until the burn in my chest turned into something colder. This wasn't about time limits or programs. It was about erasing me in real time, softly and socially, so that by the end I'd start erasing myself. Back at the table, I smiled when someone made a toast. I clapped when Carmela told a story about Grayson's childhood. I tilted my head politely when Danica shared how family is about tradition. I watched Grayson laugh along, never once glancing my way during the speeches. They spoke about legacy, about Del Vecchio pride, about who had stood by Grayson since the beginning, not one mention of me. Naomi caught my eye across the room. Her brows creased, lips pressed. She knew, but I just shook my head with a tiny smile. The applause swelled when Carmela finished her speech, and in the silence that followed, I whispered beneath the clatter of silverware and champagne flutes, "They didn't just take my voice, they made sure I forgot I had one." The next boundary they crossed didn't need words, just a key, and the quiet confirmation that Grayson handed it over. I arrived a day early to check final details. It was practical more than anything, confirming vendors, walking through the schedule, making sure everything I had planned actually looked the way it had sounded on paper. I was tired but determined. The bridal suite was supposed to be waiting, the one I'd visited twice, chosen for its soft lighting and wraparound windows, a small comfort in the chaos. Instead, the planner greeted me at the front and gestured down a side hallway. "We've moved your things to the Magnolia Room," she said, all smiles. "It flows better with the setup." I blinked. "Sorry, the Magnolia Room?" She nodded. "Carmela made a few adjustments to the layout. You'll love it. It's cozier." Cozy was a word people used when they took space away from you. The Magnolia Room was half the size of the original suite. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. There was no vanity, just a small mirror above a narrow dresser. One chair sat beside a corner table with a chipped tea tray left behind from another event. I didn't say anything at first, I just stood in the doorway and stared. Later, I found the planner again and asked if the change had been approved by Grayson. She looked uneasy, then pulled up her phone and scrolled. "It came from Mrs. Del Vecchio's email," she said. Grayson responded with, "Understood." Just one word, not even a question mark. That evening, when we were alone in his hotel room, I brought it up. I kept my voice even. I didn't want to fight. "They moved my room," I said. Grayson didn't look up from the cufflinks he was organizing. "Yeah, Mom said the original suite clashed with the floral arch they're setting up." I waited, but that was all he gave me. "So you agreed?" He sighed. "It's just a room, babe. Why are you so sensitive about this stuff?" "Because it's not about the walls or the mirror. Because I picked that space and it was taken. Because he let it happen and didn't think I'd notice, or worse, didn't think I'd mind." He went back to the cufflinks. I went back to quiet, but something broke softly inside me. "I don't care about the flowers," I said finally, "but I care about being moved like I don't matter." He turned, annoyed now. "You always make everything personal." Maybe because everything was. I packed my overnight bag in silence that night. Not to leave, just to remember that I could. Back at Naomi's place, she watched me unpack with her eyes but didn't ask questions. Eventually, though, she did. Did he at least try to stop the switch? I paused, folded a sweater I hadn't worn. Then I shook my head. The guest room I was given smelled like fresh linen and paint. The mattress was too firm, the lights too white. There were no personal touches, just a place to put a person until she's needed again. I laid back and stared at the ceiling. Not angry, not even shocked anymore. If even my room isn't mine, what else have I already lost? The next morning, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize, and a photo I'll never unsee. It came with no context, just a blurry image and one short line. The photo showed a trash bag, crumpled in the corner of what looked like a utility closet. Tucked inside, partially exposed, was lace, satin, a familiar row of pearl buttons, my dress, wrinkled, smeared, stuffed between a mop bucket and a stack of broken folding chairs. The caption read, "We found this behind the janitor's closet." I didn't move. The phone stayed in my hand longer than I realized. Naomi leaned over my shoulder to see, and for once, she didn't say anything. Her breath caught in her throat, and I could feel the way her chest rose faster with each second. I didn't cry. There was no space left in me for tears, just the sharp, humiliating sting of recognition. They didn't just replace the dress. They disposed of it, hid it like trash, something to get rid of before the guests arrived. All those months of saving, skipping meals to make the deposit, the way my voice trembled when I said yes to it, alone in the boutique, because no one had offered to come with me. Gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the replacement dress, still zipped into someone else's idea of me. My hands rested in my lap. My eyes burned, but not from sadness anymore. It wasn't a mistake. It was punishment. By afternoon, another message came through. No name, no signature, just words that hit harder than the image. "This wedding isn't yours. Know your place." My breath caught, but only for a moment. I wasn't afraid. I was done. They wanted me small, compliant. They wanted a girl who would smile through erasure and thank them for letting her stay close. And for a while, that's exactly who I had been. But now I stood in front of the mirror, still zipped into the wrong dress, and I saw something I hadn't before. Not who they wanted me to be, not even who I used to be, but a woman who knew what it felt like to lose herself and still stand upright. "I've been mourning something that never existed," I whispered to the glass. "Now it's time to decide who I become without it." I began collecting everything: screenshots, emails, the timeline, notes from conversations I hadn't forgotten even when others hoped I had. I pulled up an old folder I once used for wedding planning and renamed it Plan B, just in case I still went through with it. I took a deep breath, clicked compose, and wrote one email. Subject line, Plan B in case I still go through with it. And then I hit send, to myself. I didn't expect Reagan to reach out. I didn't expect her to break the code, but she did. The message came late at night, just after I had brushed my teeth and was staring blankly at the reflection I no longer recognized. The notification lit up my phone screen. Her name, a simple, "Can I send you something?" followed by, "I should have said something sooner." And then the files came through. Screenshots, a group chat titled Wedding Ops. The participants, Carmela, Danica, Grayson. I sat down on the edge of the guest bed and opened the first image. Danica. That dress screams tacky. We'll swap it last minute. Carmela. Let's not give her time to react. Distract her with hair, makeup. We've done this before. Grayson. Do it early. She'll be fine when she sees the altar. My chest constricted. I read the lines over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping for some missing context. But there was none. Each message landed like a stone in my gut. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was coordination. Cold, calculated, cruel. They'd talked about me like I was a prop, like I was some unpredictable child who needed to be managed. I scrolled further. My fingers felt numb, like they didn't want to obey anymore. 3 days before the wedding, Grayson. Handle it morning of. She won't make a scene. She never does. That was the one, the line that broke me. He knew how often I bit my tongue, how many times I had smiled through discomfort. He was counting on that silence again, betting on it. You saw me shrinking, and you let me. I saved every screenshot to a private folder, then backed them up again. Not because I thought they'd go missing, but because I needed to see them. I needed the proof, not for a courtroom, for my own clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure, written in digital ink, signed by the people I had tried so hard to belong to. Naomi found me pacing the living room an hour later. My thoughts were loud enough that I didn't notice her at first. She watched me for a moment before asking, "Are you okay?" I laughed quietly. "They thought silence was my default," I said. "They forgot silence is a choice." I pulled out my notebook and started writing down a timeline. Who said what? When? Why? I printed the screenshots and laid them out like evidence on a table that once held color swatches and floral samples. My wedding speech? Scrapped. What I was writing now wasn't a vow. It was a reckoning. Naomi stood beside me, waiting. I met her eyes and said, "They built this moment. I'll be the one to end it." She didn't ask how. She just whispered, "Make it count." I opened my laptop and created a new document. Title, "If I say nothing, I disappear. So here's everything." I walked into the venue that morning not with vows, but with a voice sharpened by every word they ever thought I'd swallow. The ceremony hall buzzed with soft strings and polite laughter. Candles flickered in ornate glass holders. A photographer crouched near the aisle, already angling for the first shot. Every seat was filled. Every smile was painted on. They were waiting for a bride. They had no idea I wasn't bringing promises. I was bringing closure. The dress I wore still felt like a costume. Too big, too white, too much of everything I wasn't. But I moved with purpose, not nerves. Slow, deliberate steps down the aisle, my eyes fixed on the end, not the faces on either side. Grayson stood there, hands folded, smiling like this was the beginning of something. He leaned forward slightly when I reached him, whispered, "You're beautiful." I didn't answer. The officiant began his welcome, voice warm, practiced. "Dear friends and family." I raised a hand. "May I?" He paused, a bit startled, but stepped aside and offered me the mic. My fingers closed around it. I inhaled once, softly. "Thank you all for coming. I know you came expecting a celebration, a ceremony, a moment of joy." I looked out at the sea of carefully styled hair and rented tuxedos. But this isn't a celebration, at least not for me. A few confused glances, some murmurs. I kept going. My dress was switched this morning, not lost, not delayed, switched, hidden. Someone in this room made sure I walked down this aisle looking like someone I'm not. Silence. I found out last night that it wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, a conversation in a group chat I was never meant to see. Messages between his mother, his sister, and him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They called it keeping me in line. They called my taste tacky, my presence overwhelming. They counted on me staying quiet, because I always have. Grayson was frozen, his smile gone. Danica shifted in her seat. Carmela looked ahead, unmoving. This family has taught me how to disappear, and I've been a good student. I've shrunk, smiled, deferred. I paused, let the weight sit. But today, I choose not to. I turned to Grayson. I don't need to be saved, but I deserve to be chosen, and you chose silence. I placed the mic gently on the stand. No drop, no drama, just done. Then I turned. I walked back down the aisle, past the flowers, the gasps, the still cameras. No one followed. Not Grayson, not Danica, not Carmela. The silence behind me was louder than any applause could have been. Outside, the sun was soft. The air smelled like late spring and something freer. They were counting on me to stay quiet. So I made sure my silence ended exactly here. A week had passed. The silence came first. Not the tense, hold-your-breath kind that used to sit between me and Grayson, but the stillness that follows a storm when the air finally stops buzzing. It wasn't peaceful, not yet, but it wasn't charged anymore either. Naomi let me stay longer than I asked. She didn't count days. We took slow walks, ordered takeout, and talked about everything but weddings. Every night I slept a little better. My fists no longer curled into themselves by default. I didn't wake up bracing for someone to ask me to shrink. The calls stopped. Most never came to begin with. No one asked if I was okay. No one from the Del Vecchio side reached out, not even Danica, whose voice used to fill every room. Maybe they thought ignoring me would undo what I did. Maybe they hoped silence would bury it all. And then, the envelope arrived. No return address, no name, just my first name in handwriting I recognized immediately. Slanted, clean, controlled, Grayson. I stood at Naomi's doorway, holding the ivory envelope like it might burn through my skin. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, fed the dog, took a long shower, and still it sat there, waiting. When I finally peeled the seal back, two things fell out, a letter and a printed photo. I read the letter first. He began with, "I'm sorry." Then came a list of explanations that sounded more like rehearsed lines. I felt torn. They've always been intense. I thought it wouldn't escalate. I didn't think you'd leave. There was a paragraph about how much he admired me, how I was strong, resilient, someone who always brought light into a room. It read like a eulogy written too late, like words said after someone's gone, not because you miss them, but because silence would make you look worse. He said he didn't stop the dress swap because he didn't think it mattered, that it was just a detail, that the wedding would override the discomfort, that love would carry us through. He said he loved me. And then I looked at the photo. It was our wedding portrait, one of the posed shots from the front of the ceremony, where I had stood before I spoke. Grayson looked proud. The flowers were perfect, the backdrop elegant. My face had been cropped out, not blurred, not obscured, removed, cleanly, as if I had never stood there at all. I read the letter again, this time slower, hoping it would hit differently, hoping to find something he meant that didn't feel curated or calculated. But even now, he edits me out. That was the last thing he gave me. Not a second chance, not an apology spoken aloud, just a letter and a photo that erased me in high definition. I didn't throw them away. I folded the letter and slid it into the back of my desk drawer. Not to keep, not to revisit, just so I'd remember what it looked like, the life I left. I never needed him to save me. I just needed to not be invisible. That afternoon, I reopened my laptop and resumed the document I had titled weeks earlier, Plan B. It wasn't a revenge list. It wasn't even about them anymore. It was about what came next. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I choose to remember differently. Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing peace over being slowly erased. For a long time, I thought loyalty meant silence, that love meant enduring. But love that asks you to disappear isn't love. It's control dressed in expectations. If you've ever felt unseen in your own life, I want you to know this. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's story. You are allowed to rewrite your own. And maybe you've been there too, sidelined, silenced, or subtly reshaped until you couldn't recognize yourself anymore. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to walk away to finally be seen? Drop a 1 in the comments if this video touched your heart. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. And if you didn't connect with this story, I'd still love to hear why. Let's talk about it, openly and with kindness. If you found value here, please subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story that might just mirror your own. Your support means more than you know.